לא תישן בלילה.
So today is the 5th of Cheshvan, the 6th of November. So we didn't really get a chance to explain Kol Yachol, omnipotence. We just sort of glanced over it. But Hashem, we'll still get a chance. Again, this is all leading, just so that we can remain focused on the issue, which is prayer. This is all leading to the question of why do we have to say Psukkah de Zimra? Why did the sages add this? What was the whole point? The whole point is to see Hashem's infinite revelation, which is specifically in the physical matter. We said that now we're talking about the physical matter.
Because there's a lot of physical...
Everything there is physical.
That's right.
Psukkah de Zimra is entirely about physical, the three lower worlds and the physical worlds.
It's true. I never...
And even the brachos of Kriyas Shema, even the blessings that we say before Kriyas Shema, they're about the spiritual of the three lower worlds. We're not talking about Atzilus. There's no Atzilus there. The highest we go is Srafim. Srafim are in the world of Bria. We don't go beyond that. So again, that's our focus now, which is why after the destruction of the temple did they start building the prayer this way? Again, in the time of the temple, nobody said all these things. Maybe somebody said because they wanted to, but it was a personal thing. It wasn't something that was everybody was obligated to. It wasn't. For us, it's become an obligation. Really, the whole thing is just Chazal, the sages over the generations were giving us good advice. This is what you should say before you come to the crux, which is Kriyas Shema. But for us, it's become like an obligation. Today, if you meet someone and he doesn't daven all this, so he feels bad. He says, I didn't do what I'm supposed to do. But really, this was built over generations. This is something that was built over the last 2,000 years.
Seder before that?
No, there was no Seder.
There was no real Seder
at all. Nothing.
That was really Makai.
Because he didn't need it. That's why I said we're still going to need to talk about that.
Yeah. You don't even have to daven.
Yeah.
Okay. V'zeu b'chinat sovev kol almin. So we're in the last 5 lines in Kuf Kaf Tet, the end of chapter 25. V'zeu b'chinat sovev kol almin shu b'chinat makif. What brings about the creation of...
Have you skipped some lines here?
Did I? Okay, so we'll go back a little.
Let's
go back.
This line.
כמובן במקום אחר באריכות, על פי מה שכתוב, כל אשר חפץ השם עשה. As it says elsewhere in length, there's a long explanation about the verse, everything that God wanted, He made. Now, chefetz is different than want. Right? Chefetz, it means to want. There's a number of different synonyms. We usually say, Kol asher ratza Hashem asa. What's chefetz? Chefetz means that there's a measure of pleasure in what Hashem does.
Yes.
A chefetz is a will that has pleasure within it. The התהוות העשייה הגשמית הוא דווקא מבחינת חפץ השם, שהוא רצון העליון ולא על ידי השתלשלות עילה ועלול. So the coming into being of physical matter, which is different than the 3 lower worlds, again because there's physical matter and then there's the 3 lower worlds, which are states of consciousness that usually beings in physical beings have. So this comes from Hashem's will, which is called the supernal will, Ratzon ha'elyon. What does this mean? Because there's, like we said many times, there's two types of ratzon, 2 types of will. It ratzon ve'it ratzon. There's a statement in the Zohar that's explained many times in Chassidus. There's will that comes about as a result of seeing what there is in the world. Like a person sees his next door neighbor has a beautiful shas, he wants the same shas, he wants the same set of books, because he thinks it's very beautiful and he's going to be able to learn much better this way. That's lower will because it comes from our experience. It's awakened by our experience. But here we're talking about higher will. Higher will doesn't come about because we see something. And by Hashem we say this didn't come about because Hashem even saw, remember, it's bilti bal tachlit. It doesn't even see the result of what's going to come out of this. It's just a higher will that this is what He wants. And He's going to derive pleasure from actually making it. And therefore it can't come about, physical matter cannot come about in what we call hishtalshalus, in this cause and effect, ilah ve'alul, where the result sees the origin. שאפילו 1,000 צמצומים לא יועילו להיות התהוות הגשמיות מן הרוחניות שאין ארוך ביניהם כלל. because it is incommensurate between the physical and the spiritual. And that's what we ended with last time. We said, really, even for Hashem to create the spiritual is the same type of leap. We see it, though, as the spiritual being something that has an origin in God. We see it that way. But it's not because it's really that way, because God is not spiritual either. It's just that we tend to associate the spiritual more with Him. So where we as human beings see the great leap that Hashem made from something to nothing, that we see in the physical matter, not in the spiritual matter. And we talked about the Rambam with his question about this in chapter 25 of the second part of Moreh Nevuchim. All this is called in the Zohar Sovev Kol Almin, the light that encircles or encompasses all worlds. And what does it mean by this? Shubchinat Makif, that it is a encompassing light, meaning that you can't see it. The whole point of saying encompassing is to say it's around, is not to say that it's somehow, if I have an encompassing light around me, it doesn't mean that it's like a centimeter from my brain. It's not what it means. It says this many times in the Tanya. What it means is that it's imperceptible. I can't perceive it. That's what we mean by saying that something is a makif.
Something is a
Makif. That it's an encompassing, surrounding. And even though it is imperceptible, it is what brings about the being of physical matter. So we can't see the connection between Hashem's chefetz, His will, and the coming into being of the physical matter. We don't see the connection. It doesn't mean that there's not. It just means we cannot perceive it. So we call it Sovev Kol Almin. We call it, from our point of view, it's called the light that encompasses, meaning that we can't perceive it. And this is how the creation, every creature separately, came into being. גדולת הבורא יתברך במה שברא בריאות גשמיים כמו הערים הגבוהים ליעליים. And so now the epitome, I mentioned this before, they used to say in Oxford Divinity School that it's worth tolerating 3 years of biblical Hebrew in order to read chapter 104 in the original. Chapter 104 in Psalms, by them I think it's chapter 105, or they're missing a chapter, they only have 149. What they did there was that they joined 2 chapters, they have like an older version. We split 2 chapters. So by us we have 150 then. So I think by them it's 105 already. But this chapter...
They made the divisions of the book.
They made the division, so they decided. And we decided also. In Tehillim it's easier to divide because there's clear indications that this is a separate psalm than this and so on. But some of them are not so clear. Ones that are most famous are 43 and 45, 43 and 44, and 1 and 2. Those are the most...
19 goes through different things.
Also, right.
So I think that's the only one that has 2 separate issues in the same period.
Right. So this chapter 104, Baruchi Nafshi et Hashem, so this is why David praises this so much. That's why David spends so much time. זהו שאמר דוד המלך עליו השלום במזמור דברכי נפשי. This is all the greatness of the Creator by creating physical material beings like the high mountains. Right now we're finally coming back to this whole idea of why we say the Psukkah de Zimra. That's the whole question, these psalms that we say before davening. Why didn't he do it like David knew the names of the Sfirot? We know that he knew them. He was the one who gave them the names, because that's in the first book of Chronicles, in chapter 14, I believe. We say this every day. He knew all the names. This is at least we attribute to him knowing all the names. Chronicles wasn't written by David. We don't have a parallel passage in the book of Samuel. But in any case, we attribute it to him that he knew this. We also attribute to him the order of the letters, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dal. He knew many, many things. Because chapter 25 in Psalms is the first chapter in the entire Bible that's an acrostic. So he knew all these things, and yet he didn't praise Hashem with the spheros. He didn't praise Hashem with the spiritual world of emanation. That's not how even though, again, he was conscious of it. He understands it. Why? לפי שבזה נראה יותר כוח אינסוף ברוך הוא ויכולתו שהוא כל יכול במה שברא ברואים גשמיים מטעם הנ"ל. Because here in the physical matter, that's where we see Hashem's true infinite revelation. The ability to span the gap, an incommensurable gap between the spiritual and the physical. Again, even creating the spiritual, if you would have praised Him with the spiritual, we would have said the same thing in the end again. But for our limited mind, for how it affects us, the way we see it, it's a much greater leap to praise Hashem for the physical than it is for the material. We'll just end with one small story that I heard. That I don't remember who this was told about, but that one year on Rosh Hashanah, he said to people before they started davening, he said, whoever this Rebbe was, I don't remember who it was. He said there was a very deep, important scholar in the Talmud Chacham and a tzaddik, and he would daven in tremendous length every Rosh Hashanah, and he was always poor, he was always broken, he always never had anything he needed. And there was a very rich man who hardly said anything, and every year he had everything he wanted. He said, when they came to heaven, so the Talmud Chacham came with a petition. He says, well, what is this? I spent my whole time. He says, yeah, you're right, but you don't have to be a nudnik. And just whatever you want, say it quickly. We don't have time for everything.
There's a musr to the, yeah.
אומרים ככה, למה אצל אשכנזים שניים בספרדים לא, הוא אומר ככה.
כי זה קצר.
בא, כנראה הוא מתכוון טוב. אז נותנים לו. הוא אומר מילה במילה, מילה, הוא אומר תיזהר. אז הוא עושה.